Hello again. Welcome back to the Lockdown Lecture Series. This is Lecture 5. Previously, we talked about what do designers, innovators, and changemakers do. I wanted to actually try and decode a little bit of the skills, as it's all very well giving all these nice, shiny examples, but sometimes you think, well, what are the actual tools of the trade or the techniques? So I hope this is useful. It's by no means exhaustive. I'm going to focus on a couple of examples which I hope make it easy to follow. But of course, there are other sources out there, I guess is what I'm saying. But these have definitely been extremely useful for me, and I was really appreciative when one of my mentors broke this down for me and helped me understand it a little bit. So I hope this is useful. So, some skills and traits that I, and indeed my mentor, have observed. So I thought I'd give a really good example, which I feel the chef. And you're probably thinking, hold on a minute, non-industrial product designer, why am I choosing this? I thought I'd just sort of give a little bit of, should we say, my broad experiences. I would have been a terrible chef, as I grew up in Cumbria, and basically the superhuman power is I walk around in t-shirts most of the year, but if I go into a kitchen, I lose half my body weight in sweat. So oversharing maybe, but basically, yeah, I would have loved the creativity, but hated the environment. But either way, I've always had this like allure of the mastery of the ingredients, and in many ways, it sort of explains why chemistry was like half wrong, half right for me. Because chemistry and cooking, I think it's the same thing. Um, Chefs have a little bit too much energy and a bit too much crazy, and I think chemistry for me didn't have enough. So product design is like still a nice hybrid of a bit of alchemy and a bit of process and a bit of fun. Either way, at age 17, I worked in a kitchen, and I stress as a pot washer, and I sometimes forget to tell that I was a pot washer. It had two chefs which trained under Michelin star chefs previously, so they were kind of at that embarking on that stage of their career and gunning for their own Michelin star as well. So it influenced me a lot in prototyping skills. And I remember even working with a graduate who, I hope won't mind me saying this, but the table was a mess. And I was just like, mise en place. And I'm probably mispronouncing it. But basically, French chef terminology for putting your stuff in a nice, laid out way. So the American phrase, I think, is called nolling. And so there's, if you Google always be nolling, there's, it's almost a sort of, a slightly sort of tongue-in-cheek sort of zen thing that a lot of, I think it's quite true actually, a lot of good engineers, if you when I used to walk past some of the engineers at Dyson, there'd be some of the ones whose desk was just chaos, and then there'll be others who were like really quite methodical. Things were lined up, things were labeled. And it's not to say in the middle of a project, of course it's chaotic and messy, same as in a kitchen, but having the presence of mind to be a little bit ordered and focused, I think is somewhat testament. I'm not saying it's the best, but it's usually a testament to a mind that can be creative and manage the space they're in at the same time. And so I think it's probably fair to say that the good chefs usually do manage to do both. And so that was a huge impact on me, which is why, again, going back to stories, it never hurts to say, I think one of a huge inspiration to me was I won't mention his name in case he doesn't want this revealed, but basically an incredible product designer who's now gone on to run a very successful company. But he started off in telesales, like working in a call center, not even for a cool thing, just literally working in a bog standard boring call center being shouted at all days. And I think it taught him a lot about sales and persistence and patience. So really, if you're looking at your CV, as long as you've got some real world experience, you can always find a way to craft the learnings to make sense of them. But I think, again, I've consistently said just go do stuff at this stage in your career. So anyway, it also meant that I've spoiled it as I clicked it already, but basically I put on an event with Marco Pierre White. You're probably too young to remember him, but basically very the kind of before Gordon Ramsay, that kind of vibe of slightly theatrical, screamy, shouty chef, but actually probably if you got him, in his own home, probably very methodical and less sweary. Incredibly talented. He was, I think, one of in his time the youngest chef to get 3 Michelin stars in, like, forgive me for not looking it up, but he was like 27 or something insane. Absolutely extraordinary achievement. The chef at Dyson knew him, and so I was like, I really want to put on a talk with chefs because I love this, and he helped make it happen. So thanks, Joe. And thanks, Marco Pierre White, for showing up, which was extraordinary. And it wasn't taped, which meant it was just the best, off the chain, off the record stuff ever, which I'm never going to repeat. But it's just, boy, was that good. Um, and what I say, without giving anything away, because I want to be discreet to Marco Pierre White, because I respect him, but all the stuff you see on TV, I would really say, like, take it with a pinch of salt. He's such a deep, caring, engaging guy. Absolutely blew me away. I mean, I had high regard for his craft, but him as a person, I really saw something different. So I guess the reason I'm telling that is that also sort of don't recognize a little bit like comedians. They are acting. They are doing something for the camera. And I think there are very few people who are 100% the same. They are one-to-one and they are on the camera. So anyway, big ramble, sorry. As a student, I also cooked 30 meals in one day for about 50 quid. And for those of you who can probably guess that, without getting too much into it, that if you cook something like, this is probably heresy if you're Italian, but I am, my great grandmother was, so I can get away with it a little bit. But if you make a spaghetti bolognese, of course you can use that sauce to become a lasagna, or you can have it just as spaghetti bolognese. And the bechamel sauce that makes a lasagna, you could make macaroni cheese if you added more cheese to it and pasta. And so I created this sort of like almost hierarchical tree of dishes that you can make from buying, a few basic cuts of meat. I'd like cut apart a chicken, slice it into all the different things because I'd worked at a butcher's. I knew how to do that. And so either way, it kind of taught me about project planning, because if you're cooking 30 meals, of which there are about 7 different, meals, if you like, simultaneously all at once, using the oven, using the rings, cooling them, freezing them, it really taught you how to process things. So I remember mentioning that in the interview and thinking, God, that's a bit weird. I wish I hadn't said that. But I look back now as a manager and go, oh, I would totally hire that guy who can do this, because actually managing a Gantt chart, those little strips that you see on an Excel spreadsheet type thing, that is like, project management 101. Can you run things simultaneously, some of which you can control, some of which you'll have to delegate because you can't control it actively yourself. So anyway, and I'd also say that I covered the book Modernist Cuisine. Great person to look up, Nathan Myhrvold. He is not without his critiques, as he is what I think it's fair to say is described as a patent troll. I think it'd be hard to deny that he wasn't, because he's basically a highly tactical person who goes after IP that he thinks a company is likely to want in X number of year times, designs it, patents it, and basically waits like a poacher for them to fall into the trap, and then they have to pay him the licensing fee. Now, whether you disagree with the ethics, I would say in some ways, hate the game, don't hate the player. But at the same time, I think he's an incredible intellect in the way he approaches things, both systematically and creatively. And his approach to sort of a combination of, if you're in the UK, you've heard of Heston Blumenthal, but I'd say this guy is like at the same level, just less TV, basically. He's probably doing it wrong that his glasses just aren't quite as awesome as Heston's. But I think, basically absolutely incredible mind. So anyway, I realised that great chefs are T-shaped people. And if you don't know what a T-shaped person is, of course I'm going to explain it. But do Google the source, which I'm pretty certain leads back to IDEO, and I think they might have coined the phrase. And I'm sure someone will correct me in comments if I'm wrong. But anyway, so looking at sort of designers or creative people, designers need to learn not just a range of disciplines, technologies, behaviors, etc. They need to learn about how to work cross-disciplinary environments as well. So this is often called T-shaped because it looks like a T, and it basically means broad in lots of different things and very deep in one special thing. So to break it down, I'm not going to go through all these, but you can read them. So ingredients, tools, menu creation, all the way through to running a team, managing budgets, understanding the consumer. You get the idea. Then, of course, they might be broad in one direction, such as the chemistry of food, fabrication of their own individual kitchen tools. They might even be getting into the sort of behavioral psychology of like why certain things taste different if we, can't smell it as much, or if the texture is different, all that sort of stuff, all the way through to sort of PR and media. And then they might be going in the other direction, and who knows? They might even be sort of thinking, what is the legislation on food? What is the sort of nutritional imperatives to get right? They could just be going, we want to throw caution to the wind and be all experiential and hedonistic, or they might be very long-termist and thinking, what is the impact on our planet? What is the impact on our global health? So the point is huge breadth, and I think that often the breadth is what defines people in terms of communication, because it's a more unique, and indeed it's a surface. Like, recognize you're looking at it from this. It takes a long time to see someone's depth of their personality, their character, their skill. And so in many ways, not to be down on media, but they don't often get into that dialogue. They get into all the diversity. So I think the flip side is, if you just want to be a TV developer, don't worry too much about this. Focus on this. And I don't think that's unfair to say. I think one of the people I spoke to in developing this series, Roland Harwood, publicly refers to himself as deeply shallow. And so you can kind of see the little in-joke, and he's saying, I deliberately work around this, and so sort of considering how to do that. Anyway, basically saying breadth in many industries, methods and practices, and depth in a given field. And so what about you? Of course, this is where all of this is about. So looking at this, you kind of think the trick is to experience as much things as you possibly can, going broad, and of course developing some depth in a core thing like design. So it does look a bit weird, but I'd honestly say you can go anywhere with this. So personal and professional and development, and I'd say this is like really, really long-term homework. Don't expect this just to be like, oh, thanks Jude for the lecture, I'm just going to go boss it. So breaking it down, depth. Okay, design what you want to have more depth in. And I'm slowing it down just to say this is like possibly one of the hardest questions you can probably ask yourself. And I think it just takes time to think, is this what you want to be known for? If unsure, considering speaking to your peers, and it's one of those things. I remember I was quite surprised when we did this little survey in my year of sort of like what is it that we all think each other are best at. And some of the things, of course, like Jude's good at prototyping and stuff like this. But then there's other things that you got that people picked up on that you think, oh, I didn't even realize I stood out for doing that. So I think sometimes asking people, it might actually surprise you. Indeed, you can flip it around. What do you think you're not good at if you wanted to? And again, what do you really want to excel in? So I guess the next question is this what you want to be paid to do? And it's not to say everything has to be about money. It doesn't. But I think, would you do it even if you didn't get paid? You often hear this phrase of like, following your passion. I would take that with a pinch of salt, because I think often that's written very retrospectively, and having been brought up without, having daddy's big black book of connections or having a huge amount of financial safety net, I kind of think following your passion, like without any safety net, is actually really unfair for the people who, when it falls, it really hurts. But I do think it's almost a good acid test to go, would you do this whatever? I think that's a fair question to ask yourself. And do you want to be better than average at it? And I know that sounds a weird thing to say, because you'd think automatically the answer is yes. But like, how much better? If you say you're into animation, are you like into it like Tim Burton or like, Nick Park? Are you into it that much? Or are you into it a little bit that you might do some stuff on an Instagram channel and it's kind of cool? So just be really real with yourself of like, are you in this for 3 years, or are you in this for like 3 months? So is there a market for this depth that you've got? It's sort of remarkable when you look at it, that I think what's great about the internet is you get to be all these different things, you get to have all these passions, and that actually you can find markets for this depth and passion in all sorts of different areas. But I think it's worth recognizing, are you going to do this as a solo thing? Like, I've seen a lot of, I don't know why, but I seem to be getting a lot of people who are sort of calligraphy experts. And I remember speaking to one and saying, "Oh, so like, is this a bit of a side hustle?" And they're like, "No, this is my full-time job." And I'm like, not trying to be cynical here, for real, are you kidding me? Like, are you getting like 25 grand a year? And they were like, haha, no, I'm really doing all right. And I couldn't believe it. They said there is the biggest market for calligraphy of handwritten things like wedding invitations, sorry, 60th Jubilee, golden diamond anniversary, whatever. All that stuff, people want it done in beautiful ink, hand calligraphy, all that stuff. And I had absolutely no idea. It literally blew my socks off, the income that they were making. But at the same time, you have to point out this is something that they must have spent years and years and years developing that business and that skill set. And I also love the fact that I sort of mentioned this just to be provocative, but they weren't sort of native English. And I make that point that I do love this about diversity, that this is someone who from sort of Eastern Europe had come in and thought, this isn't very common in the UK. So it's really, really hard to go, what is the market when they started out? Nil. No one wanted it. No one got it. By the time they've built up stuff and found some niches, had some word of mouth, it's really building momentum. So I think, again, I'm not going to get into politics, but I think that diversity is just extraordinary in terms of potential for creatives and innovators. So again, big or small goals. She does not need to hire a team of 30 people to do this. She could, but then she's got to worry about all those other things, and it takes her away from doing what she loves. So I think, don't define your success by saying, I have to be as big as Zuckerberg or Bezos or any of these guys. So I think also that what skills help you go deeper. So I think trying to learn more, I think is interesting to sort of, consider how is it that you learn best? Is it in libraries? Is it learning from other people? How is it that you develop it? And so I guess some of it is what you call craft. But, the other learning is also mentors can help you develop. And I think what is it? Ben Horowitz in The Hard Thing About Hard Thing goes into this quite a bit, of the importance of having good mentors. It doesn't matter how smart you are, you can be at Mensa or whatever, but there's going to be times where you just can't figure out, you can't see the wood for the trees. And having a mentor to like pull you back, help you see the bigger picture, and then do it differently. I can't count the number of times I've had people do that to me with huge success. So I can't thank those people enough, and I would strongly recommend you do the same. But reaching out, most people, even in relatively early stages of the career, are both flattered and also kind of energized by helping someone not make all the mistakes that they made. I'd say the only caveat is that, I've said this before, is just recognize who's giving the advice. If this is someone who has failed in an area and they're telling you, it's impossible, you'll never be able to become a YouTube influencer or whatever, then that advice isn't particularly valid from someone who's never done it. If it's someone who is an absolute legend that has worked from zero, then ask them to explain and break down why they think you're not going to do it. So I think mentors are incredible for this. So what companies also exemplify what you want depth in. And I think even applying for a job and not getting it doesn't matter at all, because if you learn something about, did you understand how to communicate in their language, and again, it's that thing that I mentioned in the previous lecture about being on the same wavelength. If you're wanting to apply for a job at Apple and all of your folio is really, really boutiquey, one-off, loose process, a lot of intuition, projects that only run for a couple of weeks or maybe a day, you'd have to be coming in at such an oblique angle for Apple to be like, yes, that's just what we need right now. And they might love it. But the point is, you're going to have to put a really good story together for why it isn't the opposite of Apple being really, really like strategic, really focused, meticulous, both aware of the end-to-end experience, all that sort of stuff. Why is it you're not communicating all that? So you've got to come in, if you're going to be contrary, you better really have a hell of a game plan to be that contrary. Otherwise, it is probably more about emulating their style. I remember speaking to a graduate in sort of preparation for this, and he was saying I sometimes even just apply for stuff just to sort of see whether I'm in resonance with that. I think that was really quite impressive of him to say. He was almost just seeing whether he could sort of mimic it effectively. That's not to say you should time waste or anything. He wasn't saying this. But anyway, so again, going back to this question, a bit like the calligrapher, do you need to go solo, startup, or any other things? Join a big company. So, hope that's useful. And then breadth, of course. So, breadth, in all honesty, doesn't look like that neat little strip that you just keep adding a little brick on. It looks like this. It looks like chaos. It's little bits, and then you hope to weave the narrative together so that it looks semi-coherent in your folio. But basically, it'll be a hodgepodge of craziness for a long time. And I'm just saying, deal with that, basically. It's okay. So design alone will not help you get a job or create a dream startup, to be perfectly honest. Excuse me. What companies and industries do you respect? And again, I was sort of saying, previously I was also saying this, and the other thing of what skills do they have beyond design? So, Apple isn't just about design. It's also about experience. And I mean, you could say that is design, but as soon as you start talking about things like healthcare, that is getting really far away from, blends and radii on aluminium and plastic. That's getting really into some quite deep psychological understanding of human behavior. So reach out to people who ask, what do I need to be a good designer? That sounds really stupid to ask that, but I genuinely asked that from people who worked at Lego. I reached out and I was like, what are the skills that they need? And it's not that if they said you need to do X, I just instantly wrote on my CV, I'm good at X, because people see through that straight away. And if I haven't got X, I'd explain why I haven't got X, but why I'm willing to step up to be more X, if that's what the company really needs. But if they said, we're really struggling for Y, and I knew that I was amazing at Y, then I'd of course beef that up hugely in my CV. And so I think asking the simple questions is really sensible. And so what skills are most vital in terms of team? What skills are also, as I said, in most demand? So consider what traits you possess and which may work in new fields as well. To give a bit of examples for this, if you're very emotionally engaged, perhaps do some more psychology, insights, marketing, analytical. You could go into software, big data, finance. The dreamers amongst you, futurism, strategy, foresight, business development again. Practical, it might be that you're amazing at sort of building the prototypes and all that sort of stuff, but do you understand supply chain, design for manufacture and assembly? Have you actually got any clue how things get made in China or anywhere else in the world? Because it isn't just all going to be about China now either. And process implementation, safety, legislation, all this sort of stuff. Sustainability, it's all very well saying, I care about the planet. No one cares if you write that on your CV. That opinion is like to a penny now. So it's like, have you done some life cycle analysis? Do you understand? Have you even read some basics about circular economy, that sort of thing? Behavioral science, the legislation around it, what's coming or what's over the horizon. I realize you're not going to just like crack all of this overnight before your first job interview, but just having some steer on what it means to say, as a designer, I care about the planet because ... So interpersonal and sort of presentation skills. It's funny, my partner does essentially sort of what you call amateur dramatics, but a whole bunch of other things as well. And I've actually learned a lot about my presentation skills from when she's come back and sort of described some of the techniques and processes. And so I've never considered myself, someone who would be a good actor, but it doesn't mean I haven't learned a lot from their processes and the way that they also deconstruct things. And ironically, whenever I've seen icebreakers in workshops or even sort of creative workshops, these sorts of things, it's so funny how much they are obviously just stealing from that, from all of the workshop exercises that are in amateur dramatics. Like designers are taking those pretty much wholesale as icebreakers in sort of innovation workshops or design thinking workshops. And it's actually funny when you go, oh, I know where you got that from. That's not design. So again, it's that old saying of what is it, Picasso and great artists steal. I think great innovators steal from different industries, because that is the innovation, to take it from somewhere and plug it into a different place. So anyway, put these two together, that I think it'd be a really good thing to try is to design yourself a 3-month course, especially given the constraints and the lack of structure at the minute. Designing yourself a 3-month course, literally printing out a calendar or whatever you do digitally is fine, to sort of skill up. And whether you choose the day, the evening, the weekends, doesn't really matter. But unless you're literally like a natural learner and you have incredible rigor and process, having a project to help you focus that skills. And I would say this with Arduino especially, there's no point just being like, I'm going to do the Arduino book. I'll work through it and then I'll be like, yay, I'm done. Set yourself something, like build even something really simple, like I'll build myself an alarm clock. You'll find out it's not simple at all. Let's say you wanted, because of course you got things like a Monday to Friday, different to Saturday to Sunday. What happens if you, have a hangover and you wanted to like stop it, but da 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 da. So all that sort of stuff you have to learn through doing. So I think having a project to pull yourself along and deliver. And I think I also used to do this a lot at Sugru, is I would put a deadline, and I would be, weirdly, it's almost counterintuitive, that the people who I knew could hit a deadline, if they were like a day or two late, I wouldn't really care, because they usually had a tremendously good reason for being a day or two late, and it was usually beneficial to give buffer, because it was going to be 10 times better. But the people who weren't good, and I stressed initially, at setting themselves deadline, I would be extra hard on them. And I don't mean in a bullying sense, in a trying to sort of help them become their own sort of, cracking the whip on themselves. So I think after some point, your tutors are not the people who drive you. It's got to be you. And that's even true, even though, I've been in an organization, without getting too fourth wall, Peridor is not phoning me up every day saying, how's the videos going? Have you done them? He's just like, I trust you to get it done. I appreciate I have experience and pedigree, so I, probably low risk there. But if you acknowledge that's 10 years experience, and if you're at, 1 or 2 years experience or 0, like, you have to recognize at some point, it really isn't anyone driving you. You're driving yourself. And I think ultimately that's the way you develop your own style. There's some people who are like, I'm going to do a little bit every day. I'm someone who spends like sort of probably like 30% of the project thinking and exploring and getting my head in gear, and then it happens real fast. And then I leave a buffer to basically stop doing, reflect on it, and then make any final changes based on seeing the wood for the trees or taking some different insights, and then I polish it. That's my process, but you've got to find yours. So, summary. Designers, innovators, change makers, I think they understand the depth of the design challenge, absolutely, but they respect that it's a broad range of people that will ultimately make it happen. And I say people, not just skills, because usually the two are inseparable. So having invested in new skills and networking, they're able to empathize with people and like themselves. And I think this is what I've kept saying so many times, forgive me if it's a broken record, but learning theory and applying it frequently, and a phrase that I've heard from so many designers is certainly at your stage, in the early part of your career, is being unprecious. Really don't sweat it if it's not perfect. And that is my beef with CAD. You can spend a whole lot of time getting that radii just right, and it doesn't matter. The user interaction was the thing that had the problem. So they apply design thinking to problems. Sounds obvious, but they also apply that to their future careers and themselves as well. So I hope that's a useful coming full circle. And I thought I'd just do a quick PS on a word on successful people type of advice. So I've said this so many times. Jude Pullen is biased. He's all about the prototyping thing, and he's all about talking and talking and talking. If you're the complete opposite, do your thing. But I'm just saying this is some things that I think are worth pointing out, and I wish someone had pointed these out to me earlier. And you know that I like Dale Carnegie's book. I support it. I've also read Men from Mars, Women from Venus when I was trying to figure out stuff in relationships, really, when I was really young. And I haven't even read this, but I know that it's a huge bestseller. The point is, self-help books are generic. That's why they sell. And so that's not an insult. It's just a really important thing to bear in mind. Whenever you're reading something that is very universal and everyone can relate to, the point is, the bit that makes you unique might not be catered for in that book. If it is, terrific. You fit the peak of the bell curve of what that book was about. But if you're an outlier, and actually, let's just take Steve Jobs, because it's Apple, Apple, Apple. But he sure as heck was not playing by Dale Carnegie's rules. He understood a ton of them, and it's well documented. He was very good at manipulating the tools of the trade of influencing people. But was it coming from a place that you want to emulate? That's kind of got to be your choice, really. And it's the same. Men are from Mars, Women are from Venus. We wouldn't have divorces if it was just like, divorce counsel, read this book, bye, pay me 250 quid for the hour. No, of course not. It's going to be more complicated than that. And just as the very carefully worded, 7 habits of highly effective people, it's saying these are 7 habits. It's not. It doesn't say. It's in really small type. It's almost like a slight. Don't want to quite make it sound like it is the definitive 7, but maybe I'll just put it in there. But it's like, no, I think it should have been written 7 habits of, implying there are more, and you've picked 7. They are not the. So anyway, waffle over. I'm basically saying the hard work begins after the book. And so your experiences will be as individual as you are, and try to embrace the blank page, because that is design. It is the next chapter of your life. It's everything. So enjoy it, embrace it, even when it scares you. There is a blank page. So thank you. And I'll see you next time. Thanks again. Oh, one last thing I forgot to say. So, hypothesis on T-shaped people getting better jobs. I'm not saying this is a fact, but this is from World Economic Forum. When you sort of look at the top skills in 2020 as opposed to 2015, you can see that there's just a lot more about complex problem solving, creative thinking, creativity. I mean, creativity was 10, it's now number 3. I'm not going to go through this blow by blow, but the point is, yes, it's really, really important to learn all these hard, tangible skills, but also this ephemeral thing which we call creativity. It is something which only comes through experience. I truly believe that. I don't think it's something that's like in your DNA. I think, or if it is, I use the analogy that I've used before, if it's like a muscle. If it's withered and not doing anything, it's not strong. If you've been working on it regularly, it's pretty powerful. So again, looking at the difference between, sort of Western Europe and the States here, looking at how things are basically changing in terms of hours worked, a lot of physical skills, these are basically going to be on the decline. Now, you don't have to put a lot of stock in those numbers being accurate, certainly after a huge shake-up like we've just had with COVID, and still will do. But the point is, those probably are not going to be, they're not going to go down to 0, and they might actually get increased, given that usually when we're in a difficult situation, creativity is in more demand. So I would say, let's face it, it's a self-selecting group who are probably watching this video, but you're probably in a good place in that you've been educated in how to learn. And what I mean by that is you should be well disposed to look at unfavorable circumstances and favorable circumstances and be innovative and opportunistic about how to go about the next step. So, of course, it's unavoidable technological skills are, but again, don't forget, these figures are aggregated. It's not saying winners will automatically just be programmers. It will probably be programmers who are super, super creative, who have good people skills, etc., etc. So it's still T-shaped. So, again, I'm not going to go through these blow by blow, but if you Google creativity, careers, World Economic Forum, you'll get these. And so taking a pause to look at your portfolio, what story or stories do you want to tell? I'm not going to go through this because I've done this lecture previously, but I thought I'd just point out it was kind of a happy coincidence when I look back at it. I'm like, it's a T! And of course, it's like 2 little t's. So interesting to consider. Next time, applying this to create change. So thanks very much. Questions below. I'll try and get back to them. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.